Welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat, Citizen Detectives. This is going to be my Yellowjackets Season 3, Episode 5, spoiler, review, recap, breakdown. The episode is titled, Did Tai Do That? And again, this is going to have spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode, make sure you watch that, come back, and then watch this video so we can discuss. Or if you guys don't care about spoilers, obviously, continue watching. If you guys subscribe to the channel, welcome back. Thank you guys again so much for your support. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, thank you for joining me, and make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you guys get notifications for all my new videos. I'm talking about the whole season of Yellowjackets. I got a couple interviews with some of the cast members. Vanessa Prasad, who plays Jen this season, as well as Nia Sandaya, had her come back on the channel. She plays Akilah, so I'll make sure to put those at the end, and there will also be a couple of cards located throughout this video where you can click on the links as well. Again, just want to say thank you guys so much for the support this season. The last episode discussion was my most watched Yellowjackets video this season, so thank you so much. Without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the video because there's a lot to discuss.
Did I do that? Did I do that?
So first off, before we actually even get into the episode itself, just the title of the episode, Did Tai Do That?, is a reference to the 90s sitcom Family Matters, the infamous saying from Steve Urkel. He would always say that throughout the series, and so I just really appreciated that. And this episode was one of those that really piqued my interest just because of the title, and a lot of people starting to think that maybe Tai could have been one of the people that burned down the cabin. And so I had this episode circled for a while ever since I saw the titles that had come out for it. So the episode opens up and we have Misty. This is modern day. We have her looking at Lottie's body, confirms that it is in fact her, and then we see a nice little flashback of seeing a young Misty looking at a young Lottie on the table. And then as the guy comes in, Misty asks for her personal artifacts, and at first, naturally, he says no, but you knowing Misty, she ends up blackmailing the guy into giving her stuff to her, and then when he goes to get the stuff, she ends up getting some dirt from underneath her nails, ends up getting some hair, and then grabs some photos of the body as well before she ends up leaving. Then from there, we see Misty. She's at her house, and she has Tai, Van, and Shauna there. And it's hilarious because initially when she addresses the group, she just refuses to acknowledge Shauna, which I think is hilarious, and it is definitely well-deserved as well, in my opinion. So then Misty ends up telling the group that Lottie is dead. And initially, surprises the group. Shauna says how she just saw Lottie the other day. Misty explains how the death has been ruled accidental, but she doesn't believe that is the case. She thinks there's something fishy going on, and I'm definitely in Misty's camp on this one. But then at that point, Shauna says, well, wait a second, Misty, where were you yesterday? Because you were at work, but then you ended up disappearing. And Misty, she responds and says, why would I hold a meeting to tell you guys about Lottie's death if I was the one that killed her? And then Van jumps in and has a funny line where she says, well, that would be on brand for you. And the line, or the look that Misty gives Van just absolutely killed me. Misty was on fire this episode. She had me cracking up for sure. And Shauna is definitely deflecting hard here, not only in this scene, but later on in the episode as well, as we talk about that. But the other thing that I wanted to point out is that Tai was very noticeably quiet in this scene too, and I don't know, does the title of the episode, does that hint at anything? Did she maybe do it? I know a lot of you guys, we've had discussion in the comments as far as maybe it was Dark Tai that actually ended up killing Lottie, not Shauna, which I thought initially it could have been, so I'm really kind of thinking in between those two characters right now, but maybe the title of the episode is a hint. And then Misty ends up saying to them that they're not her friends if they think that she actually did this, and she's going to solve Lottie's murder. She's going to do it not only for Lottie, but also because this is what Nat would have done. And then she proceeds to storm out of her own house, leaves, and the rest of the group say, did Misty just storm out of her own house? And she comes back in. I told you guys, she was hilarious, I thought, in this episode. Christina Ricci, she knocked it out of the park. Then we have the intro of the episode, and after the intro of the episode, we go back into the 90s timeline where we see Coach Ben. He is tied up, and then Akilah ends up coming into the area where he's being held. She has a baby goat, I believe it is, and he ends up saying how his mother used to be really good with animals, and then proceeds to ask, hey, do you know what they're going to do to me? But Akilah says she doesn't know what's going on. Then we end up jumping back into the modern day where we see Misty. She's going through Lottie's personal artifacts, and as she's going through, she notices that Lottie's phone is missing. So then from there we jump back into the 90s timeline again, and they are trying to decide what they're going to do with Coach Ben. Tai explains how they can't just keep him tied up forever, and then Lottie ends up bringing over the picture that Travis had previously had and said maybe this is what it wants, and shows the rest of the group. And then Shauna ends up giving her input into this situation, and she says that they basically should burn him at the stake. Nat says, no, we cannot do that. And she says instead they should have a firing squad. And so they're trying to decide who's going to be the one that ends up shooting Ben. And she says, we're going to have another drawing for it. And Van ends up piping in and says that whoever draws the King of Hearts, the Suicide King, is going to be the one that does it. So then from there, we jump back into the modern day again, where we see Misty. She's getting ready to leave her house. And as she's getting ready to leave her house, we see Shauna starts following her. But as Shauna starts following her, we see someone else is following Shauna as well. And so eventually, Shauna gets sick of this. She ends up pulling into this alley, and the person ends up slamming into the back of her. She comes out, confronts who it is, and we find out that it's actually Walter, which is kind of hilarious. And so ask what he's doing here, why he's following her, and he says how pretty much what a lot of us were thinking, that he thinks that Shauna was the one that killed Lottie, and because she had motive, but she's also killed before. But Shauna does bring up a good point that both Walter and Misty also have body counts themselves as well. Then Walter goes on to say that, hey, maybe we can actually work something out, and those two end up teaming up in an investigation to find out what's going on. From there, we briefly jump back into the 90s timeline again. They do the drawing of the cards, and this time, Tai is the one who ends up drawing the king. Now, I'm curious for you guys. Do you think, I don't know how many more times they're going to do the drawing of the card for different situations, but do you think that every time they do another drawing that is going to be a different card every single time? Will they reuse any of the cards? Curious what your guys' thoughts are on that. I'm kind of thinking it'll probably be different cards, but just something I kind of thought of while watching the episode. We then jump back into the modern timeline again, where we have Van and Tai. They're at a restaurant, and as they're sitting there, Van ends up bringing Lottie. She just can't believe that she's gone now. And as they start talking about Lottie, Van asks Tai where she was when they were in the city, because she was kind of missing in action for a while there. And I know a lot of you guys were bringing that up as well, saying as how maybe it was the other Tai that ended up doing that. And so as they're having that discussion, Tai ends up getting a call from Simone, so she steps out. From there, then we see Misty. She ends up going to the location where Lottie's body was found, and when she goes there, she sees some scratches on the wall. We see a quick little flash of, it looks like, I'm assuming Lottie, her hand scratching down that wall, and so Misty's able to match up the dirt or the paint that was underneath her nails from that exact location. And after that, she goes inside, ends up talking to one of the people that works there at the penthouse, and he says not only did he know Lottie as an adult, but also knew her as a kid, and that her father, Mr. Matthews, still lives there. And not only that, but Lottie had been staying with him for a little while now, and so it brings up the question, why did she go to Shauna's house? I mean, obviously, we've been having the discussion as far as she was trying to, she thought that Callie could connect with it, but was there anything else maybe going on in that situation as well? So after that, then we jump back into the 90s timeline again. We see Van and Tai, and Van is trying to help Tai prepare for killing Coach Ben later on in the episode. And I just thought it's really interesting how in the 90s timeline, Van is so for killing Coach Ben right now, but we go to the modern timeline and she wants nothing to do with this, and maybe that's because she's ashamed of what they did back then. But I just really thought that comparison is kind of interesting there. And as they're talking, Van ends up bringing up, well, maybe we can get other Tai to make an appearance and help you do this. And she makes a funny little Family Matters reference again with Steve Urkel, and I just thought that was hilarious with the title of the episode. So then after that, we then end up seeing Shauna in the woods, and she's sharpening her knife when Melissa comes over and says she has a present for her. She gives her some berries, some flowers, and then there's a little knife holder, and Shauna asks her, why do you like me so much? And Melissa just explains that how Jackie treated her like shit, Jeff treated her like a dirty little secret, but she's changed out here, and she likes how she's not afraid of the bad parts of herself anymore. And even though I know a lot of people aren't really big fans of Shauna in both the 90s timeline and the modern day, it's little moments like these, and there's another moment later on in the episode that I do appreciate that show kind of the human elements of her that are there, even though for the most part she is kind of becoming a little unhinged and crazy, especially this season, but I do appreciate these little moments like this. And from there, we end up seeing Misty. She brings out Coach Scott's last meal and says how the firing squad is coming at dusk. And it's just little moments that like this that just really break my heart. Coach Scott saying how he understands that Misty tried everything that she could. And just, I gotta say, gotta give a shout out to both Samantha Hanratty, who plays Misty in the 90s timeline, and then Steven Kruger, who plays Coach Scott. Just, they have been really highlights this season so far, so shout out to both of those guys. And then right after that, we end up seeing Lottie. She goes over to Akilah and says, "Are you ready to go back to the caves? It has more it wants to say to you, and that both myself and Travis will be by your side when we go there." So then we jump back into the modern day. From there, we see Misty. She goes upstairs to where Mr. Matthews is located, and we find out that his memory isn't exactly the best right now. But she says, "Hey, I'm one of your neighbors from, I think it's like the 5th floor. I heard about what happened. I wanted to stop by and give my condolences." And when she can't get in initially, she ends up saying that there was a package that was actually dropped off, so she has to come inside. And so eventually he lets her in. When she comes inside, she looks over and you see Lottie's jacket, and it's hanging on a coat rack, but the coat rack is a bunch of antlers, which I thought was a nice little touch there. And then as Misty goes over by the coat, she ends up finding the bank receipt, it looks like, from the deposit the previous day. And then as they're having a conversation, Misty ends up bringing the fact that maybe someone had pushed her down the stairs, and Mr. Matthews responds and says, "No, that's not the case, and the police are going to keep it that way if they want to keep their funding," something along those lines. I'm definitely paraphrasing there, but something along those lines. And so, what are you hiding, Mr. Matthews? We find out in this episode that his memory isn't exactly the greatest, but I thought that line was interesting. So why is he trying to cover that up there? And shortly after this, Misty ends up seeing that both Walter and Shauna are in here as well. They're pretending to try and fix the internet for Mr. Matthews. And when she sees them, like I said earlier in the episode, Christina Ricci was just on fire here. Her delivery, Shauna says something along the lines of, "There's a new sheriff citizen in town." And Misty looks at her and says, "Citizen's detective, idiot." And just the look that she gives her, I was laughing so hard in this episode. After that, we end up jumping back into the 90s timeline once again, where we see Van and Tai. They're still trying to figure out a way how to bring the other Tai out. But when they do, as they're doing that, they end up having a little bow chicka wow wow. Then we go over to Lottie, Akilah, and Travis, and as they're walking along, Akilah mentions how they were getting high off the gas, but Lottie thinks that the gas is actually a conduit. And now as they get outside of the cave, Akilah, she's a little hesitant to go in, and considering what happened last time, I don't blame her. Travis says that they should call the whole thing off, but Lottie says, "Well, you saw her in your vision, didn't you?" And he says, "Yeah, but it's not exactly the most convincing yeah." And so as this was kind of playing out, I was getting really worried for Akilah here in this episode, especially it's kind of been building up into the last couple episodes as well. But as Akilah is kind of having second doubts about going in, she's a little hesitant. Travis ends up finally reassuring her, and Akilah just mentions how Travis is probably one of the only people that she can really trust out here. And so again, that made me kind of nervous considering he wasn't super sure about going in there. But I do like the little relationship that both Travis and Akilah have developed this season. I definitely hope that we get to see more of that play out. From there, we jump back into the modern timeline again, where we see Misty. She's trying to make her way down to Lottie's room, but Mr. Matthews stops her, and as that happens, Walter, he tries to get Misty out of this place so they can conduct their investigation, but Misty outsmarts them and ends up telling Mr. Matthews that, "Hey, you need to have the wiring done from outside of the building." And so they end up leaving, and Misty gets to go down to Lottie's room. Then after that, we end up going to Tai, Van. They go to the park, and Tai ends up seeing Sammy. Now, when she goes over there, all of a sudden you see Sammy gets up and leaves. Now, do we think that Sammy saw other Tai again? So then after that, we jump over to Walter and Shauna. They're outside. They're trying to hack in, and Shauna brings up how, hey, if Lottie had a place to stay at, why did she end up coming to her place? Which I think is a very interesting question. Obviously, it had something to do with Callie, but as she brings that up, Walter says, well, maybe she just needed a friend, kind of like Misty did, and explains how Shauna is definitely in the not friend category, which he's not wrong at all in that situation. And then Walter says a line, something along the lines of, "I know what makes her toes curl," and I was just like, Jesus Christ, Walter, what a line there. But then he also explains that Misty enjoys a challenge, and that's what he's giving into her here. And Walter ends up saying, he says, hey, I will give DNA evidence that I was not the one who killed Lottie. He ends up taking out a piece of his hair and says, as long as you will do the same. And Shauna wants no part in this, and it's a little suspicious why she isn't willing to do that if she had nothing to do with it. I don't know, maybe Shauna is too obvious of the answer. I feel like a lot of the evidence is pointing towards her, but you guys have convinced me, so I'm kind of split on whether it's Shauna or other Tai, just because where she was missing in action for a while, and we all know what happens when she sleepwalks and things like that. So I'm really split on those two. I don't think it's Walter, obviously, anymore, just because he's willing to give DNA evidence. I don't think it's Callie. I mean, she could possibly be one, but I don't think it's her, and I don't think it's Misty as well. And so I really think it's down between Shauna and Tai, who's the one that did it. But even though that Shauna isn't willing to give one, as soon as Shauna ends up leaving, gets her hat, and that finds that there is actually a piece of hair in there. And so maybe we are going to find out that answer pretty soon. From there, we jump back once again into the 90s timeline where we see Van and Tai. They're still trying to figure out a way how to bring this other Tai out when they capture a rabbit, and when they go over, they say how the wilderness wants blood, so they end up killing the rabbit. Some of the trees and bushes blow around, and you think maybe for a second that worked, but Tai is still regular Tai. There we then go back to Lottie, Akilah, and Travis. They're in the cave, and I initially thought for a second here that I thought Akilah died in this episode, because as she goes in, she ends up passing out, and just because Travis, before that happened, he had mentioned something that just, something doesn't feel right, and so I thought for a second that we lost Akilah, and I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Come on, guys. Then we jump back into the modern day where we see Misty. She's in Lottie's room finally, and she ends up finding her phone, but when she finds the phone, she sees that it has been reset. Walter ends up showing up and says that he was the one, he cloned it, he reset the phone, and he's more than happy to share the evidence with her, but Misty gets pretty pissed, and she says, I can't believe I let someone as despicable as you give Caligula baths. And you can tell that that really actually hurt Walter, and I do feel bad for him in this situation. So far in this season, I felt bad for Misty, but I also feel bad for Walter, because he doesn't deserve to be treated that way either. And then after that, we end up seeing Shauna. She ends up going into Lottie's room, and when she goes in there, Mr. Matthews comes in, thinks that she's Lottie, and so she pretends to be Lottie because he's confused about what's going on. It was really cool in this moment that we actually get to see Lottie outside of the wilderness, but also outside of soccer as well. So that was really fun to see, even though it was a vision flashback kind of thing. But also, again, it was just a nice moment from this time from adult Shauna, getting to see a little bit of that humanity that a lot of us feel like she is kind of lost. So just these little moments in this episode I thought were really nice to see. We then go back to a little bit earlier where Tai was talking to Sammy, and Sammy mentions how, are you not my mommy anymore? And so as Tai's sitting in this room, Van ends up coming in to just console her and says, hey, I know today didn't exactly go how you wanted it to. And then you see the look in Tai's face, almost positive that is the other Tai, emerges and says, hey, I need a change of scenery, let's go somewhere else. Now, where do you guys think that they are going? I haven't watched the promo for the next episode, so I've been actually doing that on purpose, not watching any of the promos. So where do you guys think that they're going from here? We jump back into the 90s where we see Akilah. She wakes up and she says that she had another vision. This time she's out on a cliff, and she can't see anything below her except that she has Coach Ben's body serving as a bridge to the other side, and he's helping her stay up. And as she walks along, she goes to the other side. She can't see anything, it's darkness, but you can hear cars honking and things like that. So again, just getting some really weird ass trippy visuals in another episode. I was like, what the fuck is going on? So it seems like Coach Ben is the key to their rescue, possibly. I definitely want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on that whole vision. Then we go to Coach Scott, who ends up waking up because he hears Paul's voice whispering, saying, come home to me, Ben. And as he wakes up, the Yellowjackets, they grab him. They're getting ready to kill him. Natalie, she ends up giving Jackie's necklace to him, and he just starts begging for his life at this point and says how, if you guys are going to kill me, you're going to have to look me dead in the eyes to do so. But Jen, at that point, she comes over and says, you don't deserve that, and puts a bag over his head. And Coach Scott in this situation, just begging for his life, was killing me, and it's at that point, shortly after that, Tai ends up turning into the other Tai, Dark Tai, and I thought there, I was like, oh fuck. He's dead. He's going to die. She's going to shoot him. She gets ready to shoot him, and then all of a sudden, at the last second, Lottie and Akilah and Travis, they end up saving him and says that we can't kill him yet because he's the key to getting home. And then later on, to end the episode, we see Shauna, Melissa, I believe there's like 1 or 2 people that end up coming over to Coach Ben. He starts freaking out saying, "What are you guys doing?" Shauna looks at Melissa and says, "Hey, you're going to do this." Melissa doesn't want to do it at first, but Shauna says how you should embrace the bad parts of you as well. And so she goes over and ends up cutting Coach Ben's Achilles. Oh, I hated that. Whenever that happens, whether it's Hostel or Pet Cemetery, just not something that I enjoy seeing. So that scene was just like, oh, I like talking about it right now. I'm just getting goosebumps. And Melissa seemed to enjoy this. And I don't know if that's just because Shauna was telling her to embrace the darker sides of herself. Do you think that she is going to get any other members to do that as well? More so than they already kind of have, where it seems like she is rising to power, especially in this season. So curious to see kind of how that all plays out. And after that happens, then she walks back over with Melissa, grabs her bloody hand in front of everybody, and you see Van sees it, realizes it, and kind of she has like a surprised look to her face. And then from there, we get an aerial view shot of the group. Now, I was trying to see, and I don't know if I was just missing it, if there was some kind of, if there was like the symbol there, or if there was something spelled out, because I'm like, why would they be doing an aerial shot like that if there wasn't something there? And so if you guys noticed anything in that ending scene, let me know. I was trying to see, but I couldn't see anything. Maybe it was just right in front of my face and I'm dumb. But definitely let me know if you guys saw something. So leave that down below in the comments for sure. And that's it. Another crazy week of the Yellowjackets, guys. I've really been enjoying season 3. I know some people haven't been as big of a fan. And if you haven't, that's totally okay because we all have different opinions and I welcome that here. So, but I just want to say thank you guys so much for the support that you've given me so far with the season, the discussions that we've had, some of the people that I've gotten to meet. It means the world to me. I know some of you guys have shared the videos on Facebook. You guys have shared them on Discord, and all the support, the likes, the comments. It means the world. Also, if you guys haven't checked out my interviews with Nia Sandeo, who plays Akilah, and Vanessa Prasad, who plays Jen in the season, check those out. They'll be at the end of this video. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I can get some more cast members on here for you guys as well. If you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications for all my new videos. And I can't wait to see you guys again next week.